So, welcome. My name is Tam Turkai, and I'm just going to help facilitate this session. So, thank you for joining us. At Engaged Agility, we believe that engagement is the key to learning and success. And whether you attend our classes or are mentored by our coaches, you can expect a commitment to help you achieve your professional goals. And our webinars are designed to be interactive and ensure engaging learning experiences. So, please know that we encourage you to engage with our speakers. You can unmute yourself, you can talk, you can chat. We encourage sharing. But please do know that we're going to be recording this session. So our panel of experts is set to dissect and share insights from the 17th State of Agile Report with your help and participation. And I would like to introduce you to Dwayne Stroman, SPCT and instructor and coach, and Martin Olson, SPCT instructor and coach. I'm going to let him take it away.
Sure. I'm Dwayne Stroman, aka today Kermit the Frog. I have a little bit of a virus thing going on, so apology for the voice. I am currently working with Skillbook, a line partner with Skilled Agile. I have been in the Lean Agile space for 20 plus years. Actually grew up as a software engineer, building lean supply chain systems, manufacturing systems. I've been coaching and teaching and learning and implementing Lean and Agile again for the last 20 plus years. And that's me.
Excellent. So my name is Martin Olson. I am an SPCT as well. My history with Agile goes way back. About 2002, I took a Scrum class with a precursor to the Certified Scrum Master class from Mike Cohn for a consultancy that I was working with in Kansas City. And for those of you in the know, that consultancy did Fox Pro. So if Mike Cohn didn't date me, Fox Pro certainly will. And from there, kind of started growing my agile interest, my agile chops. At the time, I was a failed project manager, recovering ever since. And I say failed because I like a lot of people, struggled with this idea of on time, on scope, and budget completed, and it just didn't work. I started realizing back then, and have been on that journey since, that there are better ways of collaborating. There are better ways of working with others, better ways of understanding, defining, and delivering value. And that has been my professional pursuit since then. Have been working with Engaged Agility now for a couple of months. Been involved with Scaled Agile since 2012 as part of the inaugural SPCT class, and have worked with Dwayne for a number of years. And with that, because we've got such an intimate group, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then LL Purcell, let us know how you want to be, if LL is the nom de plume you want to use, or if there's another one. But Phil, why don't you introduce a little bit about yourself? Let's get everybody in here.
Okay. I'm Phil Gardner. And I love doing stuff with Lean Agile at scale. Been working with that since 2013. And yeah, happy to be here.
Excellent. And LL?
Sure. And yes, I do go by LL. And I'm an SPC. And for the last 5 years, I've been at Truist, which is a large bank in the Southeast United States. And I have been an Agile transformation coach there. Let's see, more recently, they decided to let go of all their Agile people. So I'm actually in job transition now. But it's very important for me to maintain my knowledge of Agile, because starting out as a developer, moving into management, doing my PMP, when I found Agile, it was like, yes, this is it. This is the way we're supposed to be doing this. So while looking for my next position, I am making sure that I am staying current and up to date with everything.
Excellent. Well, let's jump into it then. So a couple of things as Dwayne and I are preparing. There is a Miro board. If you would like to follow along, the Miro board is in the chat. If you'd like to put your contact information on the board here, where I am at, please do feel free. And the idea, what we were going to ask is that you give us your name, kind of your role, or what you think you do professionally, what people pay you to do, or what you do to pursue your passions, and then your experience in with an Agile and your contact information, just so that we have that and we can share it around if there's interest in following up or connecting with folks that are on the webinar. Dwayne and I found this image and I wanted to put it on here because invariably when Dwayne and I get together at some point, I kind of feel like we're Statler. The Muppets were a couple of curmudgeons that are harumphing a little bit much, and that's not necessarily always productive. But I think in some cases it's us being a little bit direct, and with that we ask your permission, your forgiveness. We do believe that there's a lot of glad handing that goes around in consultancies, and maybe we don't say some of the more interesting or maybe more challenging positions. And certainly Dwayne and I don't shy away from that. So if we find ourselves in a challenging position, or if we're saying something that challenges you, please do ask, and let's unpack that. Let's have a conversation about that. We're adults and we really can, I think, learn and grow together. And then the other thing, Dwayne, why don't you give a little bit of a background? You had asked, we put the Agile Manifesto and the Lean Principles on here. Why don't you set the stage for that as part of this conversation about the survey?
Yeah, so in looking at the survey, again, really apologize for my voice. Looking at the survey, there was an apparent, perhaps, loss of focus on what the Agile Manifesto really was, both when it was written, what it was intended to be, and its scope and nature. And there's a lot of terms that have almost climbed out of the woodwork, some recently, some have been around for a little while. Things like enterprise agile. Well, the Agile Manifesto was never intended for the enterprise. It was specific to solve a problem. This was a group of people that got together that had been working on different ways, call them frameworks, if you will, during the mid to late 90s. And they got together and said, wait a minute, there's a lot of similarities. Now, the truth is they found more dissimilar things than they did similarities. The manifesto is a result of what they actually agreed upon. But it was really intended to solve a specific problem, that teams were being faced with waterfall approaches that were based on predictability, that we can predict the future. And these gentlemen were saying, yeah, we're not really good at predicting the future. Why don't we work around a way that actually relies on our strengths of adapting to data, of being able to relentlessly improve and all those things? Since that time, frameworks like Scrum obviously have really, I don't want to say taken over, but they've been the basis for most people's understanding of Agile. But now we're starting to apply that term to a number of different areas. And me coming from a lean background, I don't want to say like I'm offended or anything, but I want to point out that a lot of the concepts that are being pulled out, that are being discussed, don't come from Agile. They come from a lean basis. And I love the quote from James Copeland from his book, Lean Architecture. And not everyone agrees with it, but I think it's really powerful. Agile is a way of doing that leads to a way of thinking. Lean is a way of thinking that leads to a way of doing. And so you see the yin and the yang between them. And I think as we get into the survey, some of the things we're going to point out where maybe we're uncomfortable with, maybe even to the point of disagree with, or wish the survey had been run a different way. I think sometimes that comes from a misunderstanding of that yin and yang between lean and agile.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. Thoughts, anything before we jump into the survey? All right. Then again, this is the 17th State of Agile survey developed by digital.ai, which is the continuation of what was at one point version 1 software. Digital AI makes a tool for work tracking and more within the for agile teams, agile enterprises. And I think it's worthy to note that they have been around with version 1 since the very beginning. So they've seen a lot, they've done a lot, and I think that there's a service that they do with this report that is appreciated and useful. But as we get into this, as we unpack this report, what I thought we would do, it's Dwayne and I thought we would do, not me, we would go down. Let's talk about the report, where these people, the respondents, where they came from. So kind of start with a little bit of framing on what the report is and isn't. And then we'll walk through the report and we'll share kind of some thoughts and insights we have. And again, invite you all in this intimate confines. Don't hesitate if you've got thoughts or questions. By all means, just jump in. Um, as we looked at this report and as we were talking about it, a couple of things stuck out. So there are 788 respondents on this report. To me, that's an extremely small data set, right? I mean, if you start thinking about the number of people you could ask and or get information for how you're working, it seems like a I don't know, it just seems like that there was a limit or a filter or a constraint. I don't know the reasoning behind that, but it doesn't seem like there was a very large data set. And the other thing that I wanted to call out was that the respondents predominantly, if you look at the people that responded, almost 50% were either agile coaches or scrum masters. I think that also lends an inherent bias into how they're looking at where organizations are, where they might be. I know for myself, when I start thinking about helping clients, helping organizations, I have to check my preconceived notions. I have to check my judgments, and again, working with Dwayne and working with people like Phil, it's useful to have somebody that helps me do that. I don't know how much of that happens on the survey. I assume that as they're designing the survey, certainly digital AI is not setting out to lead anybody astray, but there's a bias here. Dwayne, anything else you'd add on that on the survey?
Yeah, and it's hard to blame digital.ai that this is their field, this is their community, this is their business. So it's natural to have a bias, but it is good to recognize that there is a bias. And Martin, you called out something when we were preparing for this, that even with that bias, that slant towards an agile mindset, that as we go through the report, we're going to see some numbers that maybe make us a little uncomfortable, that we're seeing some maybe not so great trends from leadership engagement, from utilization, just from basic understanding of what agile really is.
Yeah. And we're coming, this report actually comes out 2024, came out at the beginning of the year. And 2023 was a bloodbath for agile coaching, for the agile market. There was a significant downturn in the investment across all verticals for all things agile. Capital One laying off all their agile folks, and other organizations really constricting what they were doing. So it was an interesting year, certainly. And I think some of it's captured in this report, but as a nod, it's hard to encapsulate all that happened within 2023, all that's happening within organizational design and development, all things agile, lean in 27 pages. One other nod here is the report is predominantly U.S. and European based, which again I think is interesting. It certainly lends some flavor to how people show up. Anybody that's worked with a Fortune 50, a Fortune 25 company, or multinational company, a company that's on multiple continents with teams from multiple locations, will tell you that the culture is very real. The culture is very different between the locations. And the fact that this report has so many folks from a Western culture is just something to acknowledge. Who knows what's good or bad, if this is useful or not. I think it's useful if you want a Western slant to say that it is exactly what is of use For the world, maybe that'd be a bit much. With that, then let's jump in. Let me go back up to the top. Let's kick through the report. Has anybody not had an opportunity to read this report? What we weren't going to do is try to get too detailed into it, but rather keep it at a broader level. So if you've got some specific questions, don't hesitate. But as we're setting this up, Dwayne and I, our intention wasn't necessarily to drill into great detail within the report, maybe paint it with broad brushstrokes. Okay, so let's see. This first section, and again, we're going to just walk through it, these sections here. Dwayne, give us your thoughts, kind of the introduction here. You've got some notes. What are you thinking about this?
Yeah, I felt that maybe the intro could have been maybe a little more direct to the point. Some of the questions where they talked about, hey, the state of Agile is changing. What's your opinion? Is it going the right direction? Is it going the wrong direction? What do you think the right direction is? They did reference a number of different frameworks. And then they said, but not limited to Agile, but Agile's not a framework, it's a mindset. So reading the report again, not to sound too negative, because they did some really important stuff. It's just there's areas where it could have been more effective, more impactful to if they're trying to advocate to improve business outcomes, there's things we could have done better.
Excellent. And as I was kind of kicking this off and considering the report, if I were to sit down with somebody that maybe didn't know a lot about Agile, hadn't been involved with some of the activities or efforts around an Agile transformation, what might I want them to understand about this report as they get into it? And they call out here this idea: small, nimble organizations continue to report that the Agile is a powerful productivity and organizational tool and process and approach. And I think that's right. And it's directly proportional to communication complexity, meaning that if you have a smaller group, Agile lends itself really easily, without a lot of heavy lift, to getting people to be more collaborative, get people more aligned, to get people more in line with kind of where the organization's going. And as Dwayne was alluding to, we tend to draw a lot from lean without really thinking about it as we talk about Agile. I think the report does that. And the other side of this is that the nod here is that Agile, it's continuing, the business is continuing to grow and evolve as practitioners, as those of us that are putting ourselves forward as professionals to help organizational design, to help businesses find better ways of working. The market's going to continue to grow and evolve. There's going to be a lot of opportunities. As you read this report, there are some hard numbers, but it's not doom and gloom. It's basically, this is a state and time, and it is the 17th report, but it is a data. It's an element of data. So the idea here, then, executive summary. Dwayne, your thoughts for this summary?
Yeah, there's another point here. I want to start with the somewhat negative and then go back to the positive. Is even from the statements they're making, is it feels like not only the survey, but the industry, the community in general is, as I like to put it, they're trying to use a pipe wrench to pound a nail. Agile has I don't want to say confined, but fairly specific purpose and usage and approach and direction. And when we try to apply it on everything, it's that spread that goes on every meal we have, starts to taste bad after a while. But what I want to call out, though, is the fact that 23 years later, the manifesto is still a very powerful entity, a very powerful artifact in the community. There's still something very powerful there, even if we're kind of stumbling around it a bit.
Yeah, what do you all think about that? That the idea that what Dwayne's saying, that sometimes it feels like we might be trying to hammer a nail with the pipe wrench when we start talking about Agile. Does that resonate with anyone besides me?
So yes, it resonates with me, but and that's because I think when people don't understand it when they try to apply it. So I mean, when I'm teaching Agile, it's like I always go right to the Agile manifesto itself. You know, I don't try and put it in a pretty PowerPoint, you know, with my spin on it. And I just think that shows the lack of understanding. But I do think it is more applicable than people give it credit for. I'm doing a program for Georgia College and State University for their lifelong learners about how those how that agile mindset and those principles can actually apply to self for personal resilience. So I think it's going to the actual artifact itself and thinking about ways that it can be appropriately applied.
Sure.
So Martin, I was bold enough to actually develop a video that said, I'm ready to refactor the Agile Manifesto. And what I basically came around with was I think it still pertains. It's a yes and. Everything that I read there is still a yes and. But there's some things that I wanted to absolutely mature that has happened 25 years later. So I want to take it beyond software and insert the
Okay.
word solution. I absolutely want to reinforce customer centricity. And I ultimately want to really be able to, again, highlight some of the things that I see that just people misunderstand over and over again, like the art of simplicity, trying to do the least. And it's like, people don't get that one. And so I'm with you guys that I think it still pertains, but there's some things that could be brushed up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree completely, Tam. Is for what they did at the time, it was revolutionary. I mean, to last this long, to have that much of an impact worldwide, that's unprecedented. But they also didn't have a lot of the data because it's been 23 years later. We've learned an awful lot since then. So it's not a fix it, it's a refactor it. It's a what's the next version of it.
How about you, Phil? What's your take on the manifesto and this idea of Agile 23 years on?
Personally, I think that the values and the way that they crafted the manifesto endures. I think that very few things from a process or from a mindset or from a kind of writing something in such simple terms endure that long.
Yeah.
The principles, I think you can definitely tell they were written at a different time, right? I think they were still written in a way that showed what's possible. I personally believe that Agile by itself is not enough. What drew me to SAFe was all the stuff that comes with lean thinking. And while most of the Agilists that I know, or even the CSTs that I know, they bring lean into things, I just think that when you look at actually delivering more value sooner within an enterprise or government agency or government program, you need the lean, you need the systems thinking, you need some of that stuff. But I've always taken personally the State of Agile with a little grain of salt, because I think that there's already a bias by the people that choose to participate in the survey. That in itself is not a random sampling, and so by extension, this is self-reported. So I'm always curious, kind of how this works.
Yeah.
But going back to the manifesto, I applaud those individuals that got together and they were very, visionary thinkers. I think that, like everything else, it evolves. So.
Yeah. And it sounds kind of like you're plus one in what Tam was saying of as her exercise of refactoring the manifesto is a yes and it has evolved. And I think in some ways, as you were saying that, my take is going back to SAFe and what Dwayne is saying about lean is we put a lot as we look at social systems, as we look at delivery systems, as we look at enterprise systems, we put a lot on the shoulders or in the focus or under the guise of agile that I don't think is necessarily agile. I think that we expect it to be we're agile, therefore we are more productive. We're agile, therefore we have happier people. We're agile, therefore we have higher quality. None of those things necessarily are just done, right? You have to do that. So, and with the idea of, I think your nod, Phil, of the self-selected can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. The people that filled the survey out, I think that's what Dwayne and I both look at. That it's a useful for a conversation, but take it with a bias, acknowledging a bias.
Yeah,
One
I
of
mean,
the other things that we could do with this particular report is also compare it with other similar reports that were published. So we've got, and I popped it into your Miro space. There's the Business Agility report that was done by the Business Agility Institute. And then there's also the Skills in the New World of Work that was published by the Scrum Alliance. And I'm always interested, to your guys' point, about trying to see beyond the biases, but look for the common threads. Look for the common threads that come from those different reports. And there's just always some really interesting facts that come from those, that overall, there still seems to be an overall leadership
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
Lack of really understanding. And that's the one that kept coming through to me from reading those 3 different reports.
I agree, and I
don't know if it's an
I
opening.
think of the three, I think of the three that the business agility is probably tries to strive to be the most universal, most open. I think Scrum has their own bias, just like Safe has its own bias. That you're not going to read a Scrum report and expect things that are critical of Scrum to really come about. Just like when you're on the Scaled Agile website, they're not going to talk about the challenges of leveraging the Scaled Agile framework.
Sam, your point about leadership, it's on my own journey. What I learned, I started out with this dream of eventually having the title of enterprise coach. And I was so proud when I saw that on my business card. Now, I don't care what you call me. Right. And I think that we're looking at 2 different things, right? Coaching agile teams and the craft of being an agile coach, right?
Yeah.
That's different craft, in my personal opinion, than consulting C-suite or C+1 executives. And, it's hard to look at overarching business agility through the lens of a team coach, or in the Safe world, an SPC that, now they're launching arts. That doesn't prepare you to be able to affect meaningful, long-lasting, sustainable change of values and principles with senior leaders.
Yeah.
And I think that when we look at something like the State of Agility, it's based on that lens of agile at the team or team of teams level, and that whole mindset of coaching. You can assign an agile coach to an agile team, but good luck assigning an agile coach to a group of executives that are actually going to listen to them, right? You have to be invited in. And I think that there's a dynamic there that skews some of the data here and some of the thinking. But I think I love the fact that you're doing a webinar on this, and you've got 2 really bright people here with Martin and Dwayne, longtime scaled experts, and it really is about the conversations. And so I would encourage anybody who's looking at this data to use it as a conversation starter. Well, what are you experiencing?
Yeah.
In your agency, in your program, in your company?
Yeah. Phil, if I can add to that, and this is kind of an overview of a lot of, excuse me again, my responses to the survey. Coming from the lean world and seeing leadership in lean, it was commonplace, customary, and just expected that leadership were doing the Gemba walks. They didn't call them Gemba walks. That was their job, is to go see how things were working, not to instruct, not to direct, but to learn, because their job was redesigning the system of how value flowed. When we get over into the discrete items like software development, product development, process development, we have created a very different mindset in leadership. A typical C-suite executive or leader in a software development based business would never survive in a lean manufacturing company because they don't have the right skills. And that's the sad truth. And I have a lot of empathy for those leaders. These are not bad people. These are people that really want to do the right thing. But if you call in some of the things that from Peter Senge, the fifth discipline, and how the system we're in so heavily impacts our behavior, not so much predicts it or creates it, but really heavily affects it. These people are in a system that needs redesign and they don't know how to do it. And it's a bit of a vicious cycle. And to your point, Phil, getting invited in to break that cycle to help them understand their job is redesigning the system. That's a tough nut to crack.
That's why I love LPM though, Dwayne, because
Yeah.
that's what I found is, get invited in to help with some LPM. You show the value of a new way of working. And along the way, they've picked up new values and principles that they themselves have chosen and they themselves value. And it impacts their behavior and their decision making. But it's sorry, a little rabbit hole there. I apologize.
No, that's the beauty of working and talking with you all and having these conversations, because those rabbit holes can be so invigorating and rewarding. But Dwayne, hearing what you're saying, that leaders, we are, and as a change agent, as a coach, leaders invite us in and they say, hey, we need to get better. The market is shifting. Our people aren't happy. Our quality isn't there. We're not predictable. We need to change our enterprise. We don't know how. The ones that have stand a chance at being successful, at evolving their enterprise, acknowledge they don't know how. But again, that's something that's not called out in this report. This report says here's the data that we've seen, but I think there's some underlying foundational issues. So this idea of lean, we're not looking at lean. We're looking at agile, and it should be the state of lean. I think that would be a more useful conversation, and kind of plus one what you were saying. And then what you're talking about, Phil, this idea of the LPM, getting folks together where they can do some slower, deeper thinking. Wow, that seems pretty straightforward, but it's so hard, right? It's organizationally getting people to slow down and do that. But let's just jump back in, and I'm going to put my facilitator back on here just a little bit. And Dwayne, give us this section 3. You've got a couple of points here on the software. The idea that over 2 in 5 respondents prioritize their software development delivery goals, objectives by end customer satisfactions, while 2 in 5 by time to delivery. You're asking which one's better. What are you thinking there?
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk about, some of the things that SAFe talks about, is one of the advantages of SAFe is speed to market. A lot of executives look at Agile as we can speed up delivery. Here's the problem. If you speed up delivery of the wrong product, you just chase your customers away faster. Accuracy is far more important than speed. Getting the right product to market. And that's one of the things that, again, we're being a fan of SAFe, that it brings the lean thinking to it. Principles like assume variability, preserve options, is it creates a way that we can not only quickly deliver, but we're going to learn what the right solution is and therefore accurately deliver. And that's why I think this question is almost a bit skewed, in that what is the end outcome you're looking for in implementing any new way of working? It should be accurate delivery of solutions to customers that meet their needs. That's really what we should be looking at.
Put a pin in that, because later on I want to talk about outcomes. I think that is the fundamental. What is the outcome? And the idea of product agility, delivery agility, lean portfolio, and investment agility. Then we're talking about this idea of software development. What I was looking at is as they're talking about this notion for project metrics or OKRs. I'm celebrating the fact that we're having a conversation of project metrics versus OKRs, because forever we couldn't talk about anything. OKRs were this, whatever. We're not doing that. And I think it's this idea that it's the ongoing. It's just a check-in, the evolution. KPIs are critical. If you're running a for-profit industry and you want to maintain viability, you better be paying attention to KPIs in this extremely volatile, ever-changing market and any verticals existing in. You better have some OKRs, and you better know the balance between the two. So I think that the fact that they're calling this out is useful. Again, I think there's a deeper conversation, and I think that's kind of what you're talking about here when you're asking which one's better, right, Dwayne? This idea between the KPIs and the OKR.
Yeah, yeah, and it was just calling it out. I have my opinion, but it's just calling it out.
Yeah.
And my opinion is when we think about projects, especially in the very traditional sense, from a software development aspect, again, in lean, the project concept term is very different. But in product development, project has become this finite, time capsuled wish list of things we want to accomplish in a given time box, which is rarely ever realistic. And then we try to measure the success of something that is fallible to begin with.
Yeah.
When we talk about OKRs, now we're looking at real objectives we want to achieve. We've changed the thinking. We've changed the conversation from get this work done to solve this problem.
Mm, mm. And with that, LL Purcell, what has been your experience? How much have you seen with this idea of KPIs and OKRs professionally in organizations you've been working with in the
So I've
past?
only been working with Truist. The other places I've
Okay.
been with, I was like a Scrum Master team coach, and the place before that, we were just trying to get ahead of the teams who were doing Scrum and Kanban behind our backs. So we had to do things to get out in front of the teams. So with Truist,
Interesting description, behind our backs, doing Scrum behind our backs.
yeah,
Interesting.
but that's what was happening. Is the teams wanted to do it. The company I was with at that time, dinosaur in terms it was a 150-year-old company, the legacy software. So it was when we saw the teams doing this, it's like, okay, and that's fine, you're doing it. We need to get out in front of it to make sure we're meeting compliance and federal regulations. So
Yeah.
we had to get out with them as they were trying to do this so that we could still meet those needs,
Yeah.
which we took very seriously, that, yeah, this is a good thing, they want to do this, so let's make it successful.
Were there KPIs that you all were there key progress indicators or key metrics that you were looking at organizationally when you were working
Only
with
at,
companies?
so let me go back to the latest firm I
Yeah,
was with,
Truist.
which was Truist. So, the mandate came down, we will be agile. But there was to me, there was a real big disconnect between what management had a vision for the paradox, and but not that there was a gap between the vision and what the teams were working on. So the teams were writing their stories, but we had to build in a layer in the middle to actually make the work come down to them that worked towards the product. And we were successfully building that layer, that mid layer, in several areas. But one area, it was such a large corporation that one area was doing one thing, one area was doing something else. It wasn't the same throughout the enterprise. In terms
So
of
I'm sorry.
what,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
in terms of what I asked the teams to do was to measure themselves in terms, when they were talking to the business, in terms of what on the product list we actually accomplished.
Yeah. Okay. But the business then, it sounds like the business was not setting KPIs to help everybody align their OKRs for, yeah. And I think that's the call out there. That's one of the challenges. Again, the fact that they're saying they had these, but there'd be an interesting add to the survey of how many businesses, how many organizations have KPIs or OKRs, and of those, what's useful in these. And this last nod on this idea of the software development. Again, I think it's the fact that they're looking at software. Tam, to your point, that every part of the organization can benefit from Agile. We're still talking about software. That's just I think the legacy and the genealogy of this survey. I don't think it's pejorative in any way. But but Dwayne, I like this. Over one third of the said their team is measured on velocity. Here it is, 17 years later. You know,
Yeah.
and you got it.
We're still fighting the same battle.
Yes.
You know, and
Yeah.
what's funny is we started implementing my history of Agile. The Ad Manifesto was 2002, 3. I'm working at a company and we're doing things very differently. I was very lucky. I worked in very progressive thinking, maybe because they were creating lean-based products, but my boss brought me in and showed me this manifesto thing, was said, we're going to start working this way. And I read through it and said, but we already are. And as we started to look at some of the things that were happening, the whole velocity thing came up. And here's where a lot of us, and me included, made a huge mistake. Leadership came around and said, wait, you're not tracking outcome by hours anymore? Oh, you're using these story points. Okay, well, I'll use that to track the teams. No, and here's where we made this mistake. We said, no, each team has a different way of measuring velocity, so you can't use that. Oh, that was copying out. What we should have said is what we say today. That's not how you measure it. That's what something they use to improve their own predictability is velocity. What you should be looking at is what are they delivering? What are the outcomes? What problems are they solving? And so we're still fighting this battle for making that mistake so long ago. We're fighting the battle still today of velocity is the predictability measurement. It is about helping us become more predictable. It's not a measure of outcome. It's not even a measure of output.
And the survey does a nod, kind of what you're talking about there, that organizations are starting to do that more. And again, I think there's, if you take the meta view of what's talked about in the survey, maybe though it's not said directly, there's a lot to celebrate. If you've been around for a couple of years, conversations that 2010, 2008, we were saying, boy, if only we could talk to the business. The fact that 40% of the business is involved, 10 years ago, it'd be, wow, 40, that's phenomenal. So I think that there's positivity if you look at it, and we go through, to keep
Martin,
ourselves, kind of keep
excuse me.
ourselves.
If I can jump
Yeah,
in real quick, just to add to what you said,
please.
the very fact that there is a State of Agile report, the very fact that we have the other reports that Tam put up there, the visibility, the interest is growing. That's a really important thing. And now it's time to do the hard work of get people to understand what that means behind it. But
Here's
the interest is continues to grow.
I think
Mhm.
there's a positive and there's a pro and con here, because if we do look at the information that's in that skills in the new world of work, one of the things that kind of came out of that, and if you go to the portion where it talks about the pie-shaped individual, what they were saying is that actually organizations feel like, yeah, Agile is the way to be, and we are. And we already
Mhm.
are. And
Yeah.
we need to hire people that are going to be scrum masters and project managers. And so it's one of those things where on one hand they're saying we're full in, we're adopted this, we're doing it.
That's
But
what
they're all
Capital
saying
One
that they're
said.
hybrid. They're all saying that they're hybrid. And it's for me who comes from a lean background and I see where it's like, wait a minute, you aren't really changing your paradigm. It's they're just putting labels on top of some things. And so that my fear is, yes, they're saying they're all in. In fact, there's organizations that I know that say, I'm done transforming. I don't need transformation offices. I don't need lean agile centers of excellence because we've already done this. We're already licked this agile thing. Now it's just a matter of everybody should just be doing it.
And that was exactly what Capital One said when they got rid of all their Agile people. They said, we don't need it anymore. We've been doing this. We've got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. The very nature of Agile itself, I make this very bold statement. There's no such thing as an Agile team. There are either teams that think they've arrived, which means they're going backwards, or they're teams that are striving towards agility. There is no true Agile team when you think about it. And that's the problem. They think it's this destination to arrive at, and now we're good. And that's not the case. Relentless improvement is relentless improvement.
Yeah, I think that's kind of this as we're looking at that and talking about it, this idea of agile and use. Phil, what's your take on that? What is your take on this idea of we have arrived at agile? We're there. What do you tell a client that thinks that, says, "Hey, Phil, come in and give us an assessment. We're agile, but we just want you to tell us we're agile." You're muted.
I count myself very lucky because I started my consulting journey working for a company that really was a staffing company. Their motto was "Agile's the door to staffing," and they had a service where they would basically send an army of coaches in to do an assessment. At the end
Yeah.
of it, you'd have some opinions, but right. I don't know why it rubbed me the wrong way, but I've actually only done one or two assessments in my entire career. And they really turn into more mentoring opportunities where I look around, I explore, and work with the internal person to figure things out. Where I'm going with this is that what I've learned is that there are terms that, and this is probably not an official term, but it's what I call it in my mind, fatigue. I think that certain terms develop companies and such develop, they have organizational memory on certain terms. And sometimes they get fatigued. And I think that the word agile is one that generates some sense of fatigue for many companies because, like many other new cool approaches, it was, a lot of companies, think about SAFe, right? SAFe starts off with this 50% reduction in this, 50, this and this. What I tell people when I show that slide is I have personally worked with companies and government programs that have experienced these types of
Yeah.
improvements. Although I personally have never seen one that has done all four to this degree. And part of that's because I don't stick around that long. I mean, for me, it's like
Right.
if I'm there for a long time, like there's one company they were talking about. We've had coaches there for 9 years now.
Oh,
It's
man.
like, okay. Anyway,
You
my
become part of the
point being
problem.
though is
Don't
that
get me started.
don't get me started. Yeah, anyway, but my point though is that I think that when people say we're there, I think it mean, I interpret that as, yeah, we've heard of Agile. We've got some Agile stuff. Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, it's a common term. It's not a new innovative term. It's the reason why you're seeing, you find new terminology out there to describe something. Personally, no joke, 2013, when I heard Dean talk about SAFe, I
Yeah.
was working in AT&T inside a funded startup inside the corporation where Donovan, our CTO, said, we want a place that's nothing like AT&T. So we want it,
Yeah.
create your own culture. Number one step up in my mind was we're not dealing with the Agile police anymore. We're not going to have somebody with a literal clipboard seeing if we say if our teams say the 3 questions in the in the daily scrum in the official AT&T fashion, right? It brought something different. At the end of the day, less Scrum at scale, SAFe, those are all vehicles that you can use to transform a company. I like SAFe because it's got a whole bunch of tools in the toolbox. I don't have to create my own or make my own materials. But at the end of the day, it's all kind of the same. And the word agile means so many different things. So if a customer asks me, to answer your question, Martin, hey, well, we're already agile. Okay. Well, what does agile mean to you? Help me understand kind of why we're even, what are you hoping to accomplish? Because we can call it whatever you want. Typically speaking, there's business problems you have and, or your strategy you want to achieve faster, better, more efficiently, more innovation, whatever, happier employees, happier customers, whatever it is, there's probably something in this body of knowledge of lean and agile or SAFe if we get to use all the cool materials that's going to solve those problems. And that's kind of how I look at it.
That resonates with me, and I kind of jumped down here to this part of where Agile struggles. We were up on slide number 4 of the business leadership, and it's interesting that they're saying in section 4 that the business, here's where they've seen it useful, and then where it struggles. We get down here to this idea of not enough leadership and inadequate management and support. Building on what you're saying, I too agree that SAFE is a useful framework. I don't do a lot with less. I don't do a lot with scrums. I like the material that's in SAFE, but SAFE is a framework. All frameworks are wrong. Some are useful. I think one of the challenges that we've seen up until this, and it's not called out in the report, you'll see that again, all the frameworks got dropped. There's this idea of we're going to build our own, roll our own, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But there's this nod to, well, what do we want to be? Organizationally, leadership does not solidify enough around, well, where do we want to go? What do we want to do differently? Where do we need to be 9 months, 12 months? How do we get there? What outcomes do we need? And then what are activities we can do to generate those outcomes? They look at something like SAFE and say, yeah, go do that. And now I'm delegating my authority to you, and in a lot of ways they're abdicating their responsibility when they say that, because it really is, you got to define the outcomes. You got to lead the charge. You got to be the one that's going to help us. You got to carry the torch. Number one. The other thing I wanted to call out, and what you were talking about earlier, Phil, this idea of assessments. When you do assessments, when you start bringing that into organizational change, you're taking a diagnostic approach versus a dialogic approach. Diagnostic being, I'm the doctor, I'm going to figure out what's wrong with you, and I'm going to prescribe something that will fix you. Dialogic is saying, well, what are you doing? What do you want to do differently? What do you need to do? What are you doing well? What's stuff that we could build on? A diagnostic approach for change works very good in a very small, very discrete system that has invited you in and you have the expertise. It's completely inadequate and will never work for an enterprise, because you're going to have to roll your own. Everybody's going to have to do their own. And when people start taking these kinds of this data and things like SAFE and say, this is how we're going to transform, without saying why we're going to transform. Dwayne, you and I have had at least 500 conversations around this, right? What are we doing here? Why do we want to do this? And I've been part of some really, really impressive, very, very humbling success stories, and I've seen some really spectacular failures. And it's typically the diagnostic approach. And I think, again, the other thing I wanted to call out as we were doing this, I wanted to give a
Well,
nod
before
to
you
this
leave
idea.
that, I think
Yeah,
so there seems like there's one big huge problem here. So
Go
Phil,
back there for a
what are
sec.
you thinking now? Yeah, go back there.
Go back to where you were there, Martin. Yeah, one huge problem, right? One huge problem. The business side is very slow to embrace Agile. I've never experienced that. I find the opposite is true. In fact, to the point where I can't think of a time in the last 5 years where I have not warned my IT client, be careful what you ask for. And I've had many engagements where, a lot of my work these days, last 4 or 5 years, is smoke jumping, right? So it's like, I got some problem, jump in, fix it, and then you get to solve another problem, right? And one of the common engagements is get the business. I've literally had, your job is to get the business engaged, because they aren't joining us on this journey. They aren't, they're slow to embrace Agile, right? I actually say, are you ready for them to be engaged? Because my experience has been, business leaders, once they get it, they're all in quickly.
I don't think they need to understand Agile. I think they need to understand WIP and sequencing work.
Well, no, it's interesting. It's so the use case here that, one that I think about that comes to mind is that it's, my experience is the business people tend to take things more seriously, at least the customers I've worked with over the years. And so it's, you tell them, you explain how this is supposed to work. They're like, okay, let's do it. If they get bought in, they're ready to go. And then all of a sudden IT's scrambling, try and keep up.
We didn't mean like now.
Yeah, no, exactly.
We got to get a committee together.
SVP shows up at a system demo and says, is that on a production equivalent staging environment? Or am I looking that off of dev somewhere?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
the jaws drop on the IT leaders because they're not expecting that question. Oh, well, it's like, no, look, we've been funding your DevOps pipeline for 2 years now. Where is my release on demand? Those are the type of questions that come from engaged business partners, right? And so you have to ask yourself, and I think that one question here is the business slow to adopt because they're not going to adopt until IT shows that it actually works. And what it's funny is that it's chicken and the egg. Well, we're not working, we can't make it work because we don't have the business engaged. Okay, the business engaged now, and it's still not
But
working.
doesn't this come back to the same old adage of why is there a business versus IT? Why is there this chasm? Why is there this concept of that there are these internal customers, and why can't we get our brains wrapped around that we got to create that value stream around that customer centric product, and it's going to take all of us, because we as consumers, we don't care about the politics when we buy our products. So why do we keep having this issue internal to the organizations? And this continues to be
I have a
something as
cynical
I'm
answer
teaching.
for you. I have a
I would
cynical
love to
answer
hear
for
it.
you. The
I do
cynical
too. I
answer
want to see how
is
much
that
ours match.
it's executive compensation, Tamara. I mean,
Exactly. It's
you wonder
incentives.
why it's like, here's this model about value
Yes.
stream funding. Why don't people do value stream funding? Well,
Yeah.
because how do you actually incentivize people if not off on project completion? You go, and it's like,
I think
To
there's
simplify
I
that,
think
Phil,
it is compensation, but I think there's also ego. If you look at what's happened with Twitter, Twitter is being run by Twitter, and because of ego. There's a whole organizational. That's not customer centricity. There's a lot going on there, and I want to be careful. You're gonna have to edit that
So
one
Martin,
out. That'd be good. But
let me run with that one, what
yeah,
Phil
go
is saying,
ahead.
'cause I agree completely. And here's the problem. Business is correctly incentivized by business outcomes. IT is incentivized by budgets and by timelines. And they're diametrically opposed until we get both sides of the coin. Because you're right, Tam. I come from IT. IT has no reason to exist other than to support business value. And until we recognize that and align those incentives to both trying to solve customer problems, the problem will remain.
Hmm.
I've
So-
been old enough that I was part of one of those groups where IT was part of its business unit. And yes, there were some centralized groups for some of those things that it just had economies of scale. So we didn't have multiple email systems. We didn't have multiple security systems. But I was part of one of those organizations that absolutely had their IT people associated with those customer products. And I was shocked when ITIL came about this whole, now we're going to have this IT department, and now we're going to have these 4 departments. And we've been kind of, to my mind, fighting that, because then many organizations started putting agility in just the dev section of ITIL, and then they're still kind of struggling with this concept. And I in a class this week, I've been hearing this over and over again. Our product owner is supposed to come from the business. Our product owner is supposed to come from IT. And I'm like, hey, guys, I don't care. I don't care what side, and neither does your
They're
customer.
supposed to come
They
from
need
the
to come
board.
and represent your customers.
That's
They
right.
need
yeah,
to
your
be able to
HR,
see.
your HR people do care because they're still stuck with the silos. But I mean, I've literally had a customer, and this didn't happen. It was happened about about 6-9 months after I left. And I don't always share this part of the story because the business was tremendously successful in adopting lean portfolio management, and they had 5 arts, and it was beautiful. I mean, it was amazing success, but IT didn't keep up, and they ultimately made a decision to sell the ownership to many of their major systems to to different vendors like IBM, Accenture, Tech Mahindra, and transferred 10,000 employees
Yeah.
out. So
Decimated.
that
Decimated the
3 years
culture.
later, when the contract ended, they have carte blanche on who their teams are. So now fast forward and you got this business unit that has lean agile leadership all over it. And they go with managed service contracts where they can be highly selective, and they bring in vendors that provide full agile release trains. And if the vendor's not agile, they don't last. And that's that cautionary tale side of things, right? And so, Tamara, to your point about why not together, there's an article that came about from the it's in the Safe 6.0. Not it hasn't made its way into the classes and stuff, but there's 5 patterns for business and technology. Almost every LPM implementation I've been part of is business and technology together. The operational value stream is part of the portfolio, just like the development value streams.
Mhm.
And
And
that's
why
what
I
we're
believe
talking
in
about.
LPM.
It's one business right now. The LPM
oh,
class
we
doesn't
have
even
to.
include that still,
Mhm.
because
We do.
well, but I'm saying it's
Well, let's ask
Let's see if I can-
Purcell. Are these things resonating with you?
Oh,
I do.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm sitting here nodding, and I apologize for not having the camera on, but it's better off this way. But yeah,
You're quite all right. However you need to be, we're all in our doing the best we can in our world with all the technologies. So good.
right.
Hey,
So
I do want to rest one more thing, Dwayne. I know that we had said we'd try to target this to be about an hour or so, and we've hit that, and we're a little bit over. But before we go, I want to talk about this idea of AI because it's on everything.
Mhm.
And I thought what I would do is talk a little bit about what Martin's prediction of AI is and this idea of state agile, and then have you all build on that. Either throw rocks at it, tell me what a crazy man I am, or maybe there's something there. And I'm gonna acknowledge this with my bias and my belief that we are fully in an AI disruption. We are fully in an AI revolution. It's we don't normally see these until after we have it, but there's reasons I would point to that I won't get into, but AI is here. AI is the large language model. AI is the idea of Dolly. AI is TikTok being, grabbing all the data, Facebook farming data to create model or to create emulations. All of this to say that all of the challenges that this report talks about with multinationals, getting people in India, in Uzbekistan, in Sri Lanka, and in Chicago to talk, that's a challenge. You've got multiple people in multiple time zones talking on and trying to build these products that span the globe. That's a challenge. And you throw this idea that now companies are going to say, hey, with AI, do we need people here, or do we get rid of people and replace it with some sort of a bot, with some sort of a large language model? That's going to be the transformation. And I say all of that with reference to this idea of the state of agile. That's going to be a hugely complex, that's going to be a really nasty conversation around how does AI fit? How do you balance people and collaboration when you have tools that are designed to take people out of the equation? The AI.
I think it depends on who are you talking to. Is it the companies with thousands of employees, tens of thousands of employees? Because I think, and I agree with you, I think we are in a complete and utter new revolution. It is a complete disruption. But I'm pretty excited because I believe this is going to lower the cost and barrier for people to come in for entrepreneurship and new businesses.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think these smaller business owners, the smaller companies and people who want to go off and be influencers and do all this stuff, they are coming up with new technologies, new businesses, new opportunities. And I think those bigger companies are going to struggle, and they're going to be completely disrupted by these new startups, new companies that are going to take over.
Yeah, with what you're saying, and you couple that with the government just recently basically nullifying all non-competes for U.S. employees, that's going to have a fundamental. It'll take years for that to kind of get some mass, but I'm with you. I think it does change the startup culture. Dwayne, what's your thought on AI?
So here's what I think a lot of people are missing. This is going to further the divide between the haves and have-nots. And
Yeah.
what I mean by haves and have-nots is the software developers versus the software engineers. Because I spent years training and mentoring people to go from coders to being true engineers. AI is going to take the mundane tasks and the ability to write code out of the equation. So if that's your skill set, is the ability to write code, you're in trouble. If your ability is to design solutions for customers and you happen to use technology to do so, you're in good shape because you're now going to be able to do that and learn much faster. The AI revolution started a long time ago. It's just really gained ground in the last year or so, a couple of years. But when it comes to coding, we've had coding tools and coding bots for decades. This is just
Not like
speed
this,
up.
though. Not
No,
like this.
well, truly we have. We had the same reaction when we were seeing new versions of Visual Studio that could write code for you. It's like, oh my gosh. That's the difference, though, is all along the way. Yes, I know the ability to write, the amount of code, the detail it can do has grown exponentially. Absolutely. But the basic requirement is still, do you understand your customer and what they need? And can you design solutions to meet their needs? That's the skill of software engineers. And they'll
Yeah.
use AI tools to continue to do that. If all you do is write code, you're in trouble.
It might be interesting though, because there was similar conversations when robots were being introduced into manufacturing floors and cobots and robots and ultimately with autonomous driving. So it'll be interesting, but I do think
Yeah.
it could be exciting too. It could be exciting, but
Yeah.
I am with you that maybe we do have to be careful about where it can hit from the standpoint of haves and have-nots, but it will be interesting. So are you guys good with wrapping it up
Mhm.
for the
Yeah,
hour? This was
I think so. I think so. So thanks, LL Purcell and everybody else for joining us. This was and Tam, thank you for corralling it, scheduling it, coordinating it.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed
No,
the
thank you.
conversation.
Indeed.
Everybody.
Have a
Indeed.
good
And
one.
Dwayne, thank you.
Rivet.
All right, guys, have a great one. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Hey,